Thank you for being here today. We are super lucky with the folks we have on this panel. We have people representing some of the top Hollywood creative minds out there. We have companies doing live VR. We have companies doing VR gaming. We have hardware represented up here, position tracking. So I'd like each of the panelists just to quickly introduce themselves. I'll introduce myself as well, and then we'll get going. I do want to make sure we have time for you guys to ask questions. When we do open questions, what I'd ask is you actually come up here, since we don't have microphones, and tell me what your question is, and then I'll repeat it for the room and all the panelists as well. So, Guy?
I'm Guy Primus, CEO of the virtual reality company. Can't mess up virtual reality at the VRLA conference. So our goal is to become the HBO of virtual reality, and that means creating the best tentpole interactive narrative content and the distribution platform that goes along with it.
Hi, my name is Halsey. I have two VR companies. One of them is called Voxelus, and it's sort of like Minecraft for VR. You can build your own worlds, but unlimited content. We started a marketplace in March, so you can buy hopefully branded content from people like Disney, but also content that other people create and can upload into the cloud. I just announced about 3 weeks ago a company called Reality Lab, and we have the first real-time VR camera that runs 25 frames per second, perfectly stitched, and can stream over the internet.
Hello, my name is Michael Hamilton. I'm the CTO of IndoTraq, and what we do is we do positional tracking down to the millimeter. We don't use any cameras. We have no cords attached. It's completely wireless, and it allows people to walk around a space as big as 100 meters by 100 meters indoors, or even up to 300 meters by 300 meters outdoors. So by simply wearing something like a Gear VR mask and a small tracking tag that's about 1 inch by inch, it can track your position so well that when you're in VR, you actually think you're on a football field playing with the players.
Hi, I'm Guy Bendov. I'm CEO of Sidekick VR. We're one of the largest developers and publishers of mobile VR games. We have games across many platforms, starting with the Gear VR all the way to the smaller mini headsets that are out there. And we work with many game developers and game publishers, bringing their known games and brands into mobile VR as soon as the first half of this year. So look out for more games from Sidekick VR.
Great. And my name is Michael Schmier. I'm an employee at Samsung. I'm general manager for our Milk VR service, which is a leading 360 video service that you guys can access from the Gear VR. And we've been lucky enough to work with all these guys through various partnerships and relationships. So I guess I want to go ahead and kick it off. And obviously, if you're on this panel, you believe a little bit in mobile VR, or at least you have a strong opinion about it. But if you go into the expo room, right, you see half the guys with tethered VR and certain experiences, and you see a lot of people with mobile headsets. And as a developer or a content creator, how do I think about that world where there seems to be some overlap, but a lot of dichotomy between what's going on and what's possible in tethered VR and what's possible and what's going on in mobile VR? So give us a little bit about your opinions about that, and then kind of what you see or why you're so attracted to mobile VR for your different ventures. Guy, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I'll start it off. I mean, I'll say this. I'm an industrial engineer, so for me, life is about optimization. And when I look at mobile VR, that's where most of the people are. I mean, there are hundreds of millions of handsets already that are VR enabled. And so it's really important for us that we deliver compelling virtual reality content for those devices. Now, obviously, if we want to be the best, we have to continue to produce the best experiences, and that's where the tethered headsets come in. So I think for us, it's always going to be a balance between kind of giving people and pushing the bleeding edge with tethered headsets and the computing power and the high density screens that they come with, but balancing that with the mobile, where people can take it on airplanes and on the trains and buses and highways and byways of the world, and because that's where the money is.
And do you think about literally having to produce not necessarily two different experiences, but two different versions of the experience you're creating, or are you having to optimize for something that works on both experiences, at least as a content creator from your perspective?
Actually, so we've started creating 4 different versions. So there's the mobile version, which we, again, optimize for mobile, and some of my coworkers are out in the audience, but we've created separate versions for Oculus and Vive and the PlayStation VR, so that they mirror each other and they have the same functionality, but every platform is different, and so we create multiple versions of every product.
Okay.
Yes, so it was an interesting problem at Voxelus because we're letting ordinary people create VR worlds, right? And they have no notion of how much processing power is in a phone or how much is in a computer running Oculus. So what we do is we actually allow people to see on a meter that shows how many more objects they can add to a world before they then move out of the mobile and into the Oculus.
That's interesting. So
Desktop.
kind of giving users a visual cue
So yeah,
of
so
what
they
they
can
can do.
and then we then determine when it goes into the cloud, based on the number of polygons and various different things, which libraries it goes into. So we're only taking the content that works for Samsung VR, for instance, and showing those, and then the others are going into a completely different library. In the case of Reality Lab, we're focusing our video actually on what we were demoing at CES was the Samsung VR. And the reason is that I don't think there's anything better about the tethered platforms for video than there is today for the mobile platforms. And the benefit of mobile is, of course, you can do it anywhere. And we were actually showing it over a LTE network.
So let me stop there because you guys are focused a lot on video, and our 2 guys over here, like one's kind of doing gaming and one's positional tracking, which certainly extends beyond video. So let me ask kind of you guys the same question, because certainly with a game, you can have a pretty different experience in a tether world versus a mobile world today. So Guy, can you tell us how you think about that? And then Michael, maybe you can jump in with kind of your technology and how you think about applying that technology to mobile versus tethered and so on.
Right. Well, we care about the players. We care about the audiences and how they play. For that, we feel that the opportunity with tethered, high-end, high-definition VR is very different than the one that's around mobile. You're talking about something that's very premium, very expensive. All the 3 main high-end platforms, something that people will need to invest a lot in, both
those
in terms
being PlayStation,
that is
Oculus
PlayStation
Rift,
VR,
and
right?
HTC
The Rift and
Vive.
the Vive, and you're looking at big investment, big expectations from the audience for high quality games and content that costs a lot of money to produce.
Right.
Especially if it's interactive in 3D. On the flip side, when you look at the very, very accessible mobile VR opportunity, you're looking for a wider market, wider audience that is happy to taste, go into short bursts of gameplay, have fun, try this, try that. It's an audience that's already very engaged with mobile gaming, could be social gaming down to, very, very social games that you have now on mobile, down to more gamey or gamers type of experiences. And this is where we decided to focus our resources.
Great. And then, Michael, tell us a little bit about kind of from your perspective. You're actually focused on a little bit more the hardware side and
That's
supplementing that hardware side. How do you think about tell a little bit to the audience a little bit more about what you do and kind of how you think about tethered versus the mobile world.
Well, for us, as far as a developer is concerned, the same game that you develop for a tethered solution can also work in a mobile solution. We're just providing the ability to track very precisely a position of objects or people. So the big difference is, can the content provider, can the developers make the game work on the mobile platforms, which the mobile platforms are getting faster and faster, and people are getting better and better software to be able to do that. So with us, we're just trying to, track everything, as small as, or as the most precision possible.
Right.
So-
So in your situation, like, hey, if I can develop a game that works across both platforms, common denominator processing power, but it requires positional tracking, then your hardware solution could enable that on the mobile side.
Yeah, because our solution, we basically just give you the coordinates and the rotation matrix
Okay.
of where that object is at, and it's the same whether you're tethered or mobile.
Okay.
This is exactly why we're so optimistic about the mobile VR market being able to scale up, because what Michael is doing and other companies in that space, adding all these features on top of a very smart phone already, and adding the motion, adding the ability to know where you are in space, all that is coming up and scaling up the very accessible start.
So let's now dive a little bit deeper into mobile. And I know as a GM at Samsung, I'm painfully aware of some of the limitations from a mobile perspective, and I'm sky high also on the potential. So talk a little bit from your perspective today. What are some of the major pain points from your perspective? And then if there are things that excite you around mobile, just even beyond just the scale numbers, talk about those as well. But like, what are our main limiting factors on mobile today, and where do we have to be 12 months from now, basically?
I can take that. I mean, for us, it's really the resolution is the limiting factor. I mean, and I know everyone is going to say that same thing. So, but as someone who, one of my co-founders, Rob Stromberg, actually created the world for Avatar, and he directed Maleficent. And so when you have something that beautiful, and elegant, you want it to look really good, because when you're looking through the screen door, it just doesn't look the same.
Right.
So that's the major limiting factor for us. And processing power obviously is another limiting factor, and frame rates. But I'm learning a bit on this panel, because interactivity is another big thing for us. I mean, the experience we developed for The Martian is very interactive, and it's very engaging, and it's kind of universally been well received. But we can still push the boundaries a little bit further. And again, mobile doesn't provide the same opportunity right now that the tethered headsets do.
Right.
At least kind of in our development platform.
Yeah, I think information is a big part of it, because Samsung was our problem up until about 3 days ago.
I knew right after I asked this question, I knew every single one of these guys was going to come back to me and look back at me and say it was my fault.
But there's a happy ending,
Okay.
and that's why I'm bringing it up. So we could not get full 4K resolution, because we deliver 4K stereoscopically, and we could only run at 3/4 of resolution without the phones dying, basically. Right. So they would run for a few seconds, and if the scene was very complex, they would choke. But we found out how to do it, and it just took a lot of trial and error and trying different methods. And a lot of the stuff is that I think what needs to happen is, for you guys and other people, there needs to be more kind of developer information. And this is what kind of lacks, because this industry is very young, and so there's not places that you can go and find out answers to these. So we have to figure all this stuff out ourselves.
Yeah.
But now we're running at straight 4K as opposed to 3/4. And it really was just a whole bunch of trial and error that needed to happen in the phone. So I think, for you guys and everybody else who's doing this, the more information you can make available to developers, the faster this stuff will happen.
So one thing is we have resolution. So another thing we have is kind of a better understanding of like where are the boundaries of the device when we run into problems. How do we problem solve
How do
around
you get
those,
around them?
especially as it goes deeper into the hardware, the OS. And I think some of the questions you're talking about apply both to us and our partner Oculus on the OS side as well.
That's correct.
Michael, Guy, do you
Yeah.
guys have thoughts as well?
I have some thoughts too, because when we first got started doing this, making some of the games, it was very difficult to take a game that was made for a tethered solution and bring it to mobile. But since then, we found out all kinds of tricks that you can do, whether it's the graphics in the background, whether it's the terrain, that initially when we first tried to do a scene with custom terrain, it would hardly work on a phone. But now we can do terrain seamlessly. And it's just a matter of what tricks and manipulations you need to do and the tools you have to be able to make this happen. So,
Right.
Great.
As game developers, we always kind of use a lot of tools and a lot of tricks to maximize what output we get from the platform. And here, we feel that the phones are becoming stronger, and we know they will be stronger. I think the big point for us and a lot of our partners is how to deliver better quality games in general. We're looking to an audience that is already expecting games and other content that costs a lot of money to produce. Early days, don't necessarily justify that, and we figure out that we found a way to work with a lot of our partners to kind of sponsor that and bring that to market. For us, our goals for this year when it comes to hardware is to find all those extra accessories that allows, additional controls, right now very limited, and additional ways to get more exposure to the content. So via the stores, but also maybe via retail. How do we get all those games out to market so people will know about it and be able to download it? I think, outside of this room and maybe the room next to us, I think there's huge market out there that does not know that it can download content to the phone and very easily, right, $99 can enjoy new great experience.
Right. So just so you guys know, I'm trying to be as neutral as possible. Let's talk about all the different mobile platforms that are out there, and are there ones we're not thinking about? So when I hear most people talking about mobile, I hear Samsung VR, and I hear Google Cardboard. So if you think about, that's pretty Android-centric from at least a phone device perspective, even though Oculus is involved. So first of all, could you tell the audience a little bit how you guys view Cardboard versus Gear VR?
Right.
Because certainly, if you guys were talking about mass distribution, well, Google Cardboard takes that to a different level. What are the trade-offs there from your perspective? And then for those in the audience thinking about other platforms, are there other, what about iOS and VR? Are there other VR ways we should be thinking about VR mobile, other platforms?
Right. I'll
Please.
give a quick stab. But first of all, we are making sure all our games run on iOS as well. And we know that the players there don't necessarily know that they can use their iPhone to play, but they can. And we make sure that they will know about it. We're taking responsibility for not anything else, right? I think it's in our own, big motivation to do that.
And for the uneducated audience, can you explain, can they play the game on the iPhone? Is it just in 2D, or can they buy a third-party headset and make that into VR? So, how are you thinking about that?
Yeah, so they take, you can take your iPhone and put it on any cardboard, standard headset, right?
Yes.
If that makes sense.
Right.
The Mattel Viewmaster is an example.
Yeah.
And we think that's great when, as a content provider, we love the fact that there's one SDK, the Cardboard SDK, and that it runs on so many phones and headset. And, that's super important for us in terms of, how wide can we get in what investment. I think Gear VR carved itself a very strong high-end niche, and that also translates to players that are more engaged and honestly more interested to pay for content versus the other content. And this is a big consideration for us as well. So right now, as the market is today, we're really almost cutting it to, in that niche of mobile VR into that premium Gear VR players who are different, a bit of a different audience than the cardboard.
And especially if you want to
Right.
monetize or you're
It's-
charging
exactly,
for something or
exactly.
Got
And
it.
then the iPhone as an obvious next step that will happen, but only very few people know when.
Yes.
So I'm going to answer that in two ways. One is we actually have an equity stake in a headset manufacturer called Ion VR. So they've yet to launch, but Ion VR is device agnostic and kind of has technology, not just kind of plastic lenses, and it actually has some integrated technology and patents that they filed that kind of make it a bit more compelling. And they've been approached by a number of I'll say very mainstream, very I guess, compelling retailers, about their product. And so, we're developing for that. The other thing, as it relates to Google Cardboard, and I don't, want to diss Google because I think it's really, it's important that they're there. But for us, again, providing premium content, and especially in this very early stage of the VR market, it's really important that we establish a brand. And if we're going to be the HBO of virtual reality or the Pixar of virtual reality, we have to provide Pixar-level experiences. And I think, as you're suggesting, and these weren't your words, but kind of Google Cardboard doesn't necessarily meet the same kind of benchmark that the other kind of platforms do. Now, in 2 or 3 years, I think A, their platform will get a lot better, and then B, people will hopefully know our brand name, and so then we can kind of be a little bit more, we can go to and cast a wider net.
Great. Okay.
And just real quick, speaking from a hardware side, our system will work with any mask, any operating system, because basically we're just giving coordinates and a rotation matrix. We don't really care. But when it comes down to a mobile system that you can get today, the Gear VR is still our favorite, just because it's very inexpensive and it works very well. But it will work with other systems, but we do like.
Yep.
So I've been doing this for a really long time now. So CNET launched in 1995, and a lot of these issues they're identical to the same kinds of issues. We had HTML 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, which do you support? I mean, a lot of the same kinds of things. But the most important thing in the discussion of these various different technologies is there's sampling and adoption, and they're very, very different, because there are a lot of people who will go try stuff, and VR is great for sampling. You can just show somebody who's never seen VR just about anything in VR, and they'll go, wow, that's amazing. But the question is, can you get them to come back and do it again,
That's a great
and
point.
again, and again,
That's
and
a great
again?
point.
And so the reason that, and I'm not, the reason we're trying to get earphones to work, and we now have, is because I think other than, I think cardboard is going to be very good for sampling, but I think it is not sufficient for adoption. Adoption is hard. Like getting somebody to come back over and over and over again to a media product or to anything is a really, really hard problem. You have to understand their, what it is that they want, and you need to give it to them in a way that nobody else can. And so we haven't spent a lot of our time focusing necessarily on the sampling platforms, but where we think there's going to be adoption, we're trying to drive the experience as hard as we can so that we create something totally unique and special that will make people want to come back again, because that's the only way to sustain. This is like the internet was in '94. That's the only way you're going to sustain the industry.
Well, let me answer one other way. Open development platforms, whether it's iOS or Android, you can develop an app and you can launch it, and the platform doesn't have as much to say about the quality. I mean, and there are poor VR apps out there that are distorted and very just poor experiences. And so I think insofar as you have a closed kind of garden, and that's what you guys do with Milk, is you actually provide specs and kind of people have to meet a certain bar. And I think once you get dizzy from VR, you may never, even if you sample it, you may never pick VR goggles up again. And I've heard those use cases.
Those stories.
Yeah.
Yep. So, and I think, just from my personal perspective, I think of it as ongoing engagement. Adoption is one of our biggest challenges in the industry. And I think of it in two ways. I think of it, look, if you're just a gamer, I think it's pretty clear people are going to create compelling, addictive content and experiences. But I think if you're talking about more than gaming, that's the challenge for our industry. If you're talking about video and entertainment, if you're talking B2B applications, there's a whole range out there where the engagement model is still to be proven. And I think a lot of that has to do with quality. I think a lot of that has to do with our content models and blending. You know, we could have a whole panel on how we create content for the 2D world and how that's just turned upside down for the VR world in terms of everything from script and editing and so on. So that really rings true. So one more question for us, and this is just kind of a softball question that'll let you guys say whatever you want. And then you guys be thinking of any questions that you want to direct to the overall panel, and we'll have 15 minutes for that. I guess in closing, you know, you have a audience here, probably, I'm guessing, some press and analysts, some aspiring creators. This is LA. Hopefully we have a lot of creators here. We have some developers. We have vendor communities. I think what is, you know, based on you guys are super, super experienced. So telling, you know, an audience that wants to learn, what would you tell them about developing experiences in mobile today, maybe what to expect a year from now, or where you think the market will be a year from now, or just anything in closing, any wisdom that you guys want to pass on to our audience?
I'll just say, right now there's so much stuff out there that's not good. There's a minimal risk in just getting out there and experimenting. You know what I mean? So try it and you know, find, like, I mean, this is a perfect forum to find people who, you know, kind of are interested in co-creating things. And I think, you know, the industry has to grow a lot very quickly. And, you know, there's stuff out there that's good and stuff out there that's not good. But, you know, I think really just the experimentation and, you know, picking up an inexpensive camera and, you know, kind of putting something together and learn by experimentation, because there are a lot of, you know, I give a presentation called The 5 People You Meet in VR. And one of the people that you'll meet inevitably is a charlatan. Like, we all can say that we're experts, and I know people have been doing this for a long time, but there are no one who's really perfected this yet. There are no, you know, the Pixar to virtual reality is still to be discovered, you know, so it's not that there, like you said, you know, the whole thing could change very rapidly and be, you know, kind of standing on its ear, you know, this time next year, but, you know, just getting out there and doing something, because it's the time right now.
Yep. Hey, Michael, could you, like, in terms of thinking about the audience, like, help us, what would you recommend to people developing for mobile experiences now? Because I'm betting most of them don't develop with necessarily position tracking in that in mind. Like, what would be your advice to developers thinking about mobile optimization, how to think about that?
Well, the biggest thing I see is the size of the space you're in limitation, because everything I've seen so far is all based in your living room in a very small space. But now we're giving technology that you can literally cover an entire football field. So you can imagine sports where people actually could experience some crazy virtual reality experience and walk around an entire football field and have that experience. So.
Great.
We're looking at the 5th screen, right? We had the small screen, we had the medium screen, we had the big screen, we had the huge screen. This is a new screen, a new type of screen. It surrounds us. It's not just a big 2D screen that's in front of us. If you're a creator, you know that this is huge. And if you're a creator in VR, you know that nobody figured that out completely. So the opportunity there is to go out and create something that defines that new screen is huge. Whether you're doing movies, if you're doing games, being able to create that piece of content is amazing. And I wish everybody in this room who's creating content to be that person. And I wish everybody that creates game, if you have that, come to speak to us, because we want to publish you. But the opportunity is there, and I think that's what exciting for everybody. It could be high-end, it could be high quality, but it also could be mass market as Candy Crush, right? And we're just at that first year where this is just happening. The headsets are out, and some of them will be out soon. So it's an opportunity to step in, but it's also a race. and I don't know what excites me more, but I want to be there. So we're all in.
Great. And I think the one thing in speaking with a lot of people that I would say, and I would add on to the experimentation, experiment and put yourself out there, but really embrace and understand, study what VR is, what it can be. And because where you see most of the failures is like people jumping in too quickly, I think, and not understanding what an experience in VR is all about. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with people. We're talking about VR. I'm going, this person is an expert, and then I go, oh, have you tried the headset? And they go, no, I haven't actually tried VR, but I'm assuming this is, like, that's an extreme example, but there are maybe that falls under the charlatan category that you mentioned, an extreme example, but just really think through what VR is all about. Okay, I have other questions for the panel just in case, but I thought I would throw it open to you guys. So question number one right here.
Yes. So I'm wondering about how, if you've connected with immersive theater people, because those are people who have a lot of experience with creating immersive environments, and it seems like they're an untapped resource. So have you guys made efforts to really bring in immersive theater, or and actually I think the theater is actually a better art than film as a way to kind of understand VR and even in AR as well. So my question to you is that an outreach that you're doing to theater people? Or?
Yeah,
Hold on, let me just repeat the question. So I think the question in general was immersive theater, and has there been outreach to theater community, immersive theater community in general, thinking about what we can learn from theater as it applies to VR, which is kind of, if you think about it, more of a 3D wraparound experience to begin with versus just traditional filmmaking.
So I've heard that more and more, and to answer your question, yes. We actually just had a meeting Thursday with a gentleman who's kind of from the immersive theater world, and I think you're probably right. I mean, I think there is a lot to be learned because they're not constrained by a 16:9 frame and any of that stuff. They have to push the boundaries, and takes a lot to get a theater full of people for a title that's not marketed worldwide. So they're really good at what they do. I think I'll credit my company, and it's not just me, but the DNA of our company is we kind of search under every rock. So we're talking to everybody, and we've actually put people together that have formed companies, and so we're really we see this as kind of the advent of cable. It's you talked about the fifth screen. It's a brand new world, and so we aren't leaving any stone unturned as it relates to kind of what the opportunity is and who's going to be the kind of critical to the success of this moving forward.
Yeah, it's funny. I was actually in Vienna, and I was at the theater, and I realized because one of the things that you have to ask yourself is where can you put these cameras that they can fit and don't ruin the experience, but also give an incredible experience to the experiencer. And so the things like tennis, which work really well, you can put them on both ends and on the sides, for instance. But it dawned on me that the theater, it's not a huge market like the Super Bowl, obviously, but I think from an adaptability to VR, I think it's very adaptable to the medium.
I'd like to say one thing just real quick. Outside of VR, we're also, because we can track things so well, like an actor can actually wear a name tag or put this tracking technology in their microphone. And everywhere they go on the stage, all the lights and side cameras can follow them. So we're all into the automation world as well and helping that kind of stuff happen too. So.
Okay, I'll come back to you. Okay, how about you? We'll go up front here.
So at CES, I tried like 5 mobile tracking solutions, and I tried yours, and it was so good. And I just got
Are you employed by his company?
I
I went to his office. I saw you. Yeah.
Samsung and the hand tracking things. And I tried the Oculus Touch finally, and I got sick with Oculus Touch. I've never gotten sick with the Vive. I think your tracking is probably the best tracking system I've tried. So I want to know if Samsung, can you like right now commit to buy them for your
So this guy asked a completely inappropriate question to me. My PR person and marketing people are over there, like, cutting,
100 meters by 100
I won't repeat his question since I cannot answer it, but I think he was basically commenting on there being a variety of motion and position trackings complimenting him on his
Thanks.
position tracking and then suggesting Samsung might have a relationship in the future. How about all the way in the back of the room? Yes, you. Scream, please.
So right now, there's different like mobile VR on a bus, for example, or like you were talking about VR on a football field. There seems to be a very fragmented market of how we're going to use VR. Just wondering if you have a prediction, a guess how we're going to be using VR in 5 years. Is it going to continue to be fragmented, or is it going to kind of converge onto one default where everyone's kind of most comfortable?
And it's so most people could hear that, but let me also do a take on his question. It's basically, hey, we're experimenting all over the place. We're fragmented. Everybody from doing live, we're talking live, we're talking theater, we're talking games, we're talking position tracking. Are we going to be that fragmented 5 years from now? Do you guys have a gut feeling of the verticals that are going to win out? And I know you're going to say gaming on the end, and that's an easy one.
Well-
But yeah, like where do you guys? I think it's a really great question about like what you guys think is going to win.
Let me give you the difference between VR and for instance, at CNET we had 5 TV shows. We had 4 on the USA and Sci-Fi Channel and 1 on CNBC. We had a production booth in our offices, and we bought the equipment from Samsung and Sony, and it all fit together, and it was NTSC, and then later it was HD. There are no standards for any of this stuff, so there's no ability to produce these things and buy something from Samsung. And I mean, we are building end to end, because the only way that you can assure that something will work is you literally build the camera, you build this infrastructure, and you build the
And a lot of
thing on
companies are doing that.
and
especially
and so I think it's going to take 3 to 5 years before you start coalescing around certain standards where these things become plug and play. But I do not think that's going to happen in the next 3 years. It's going to take a while.
It's my question to you back is, what do you use your TV for? Is it watching movies, shows? Do you plug in your game system and play? It's a screen. It's an output device that connects to a, PC or video device. This is what's great. This is the opportunity. This is what's huge about it. It is a screen that you can do so many things with it, and it's either connected to a big PC or your phone. It doesn't even matter. It can do all that. So this is why VR actually touches everybody right now, again, in this room and very soon outside of this room. And this is what's exciting about it for everybody.
Right. I would say that it's really interesting. You can think about, in a simplistic way, you can think about this in two ways. There is the whole consumer entertainment side of the world, but then there's a whole world of like real life applications that you've heard people talk about up here in the past. There's health applications, there is real estate applications, there are car applications, like go test drive a car and check out car. You never have to, you never have to actually go to a dealership again. And we could go on and on and on. I think there are definitely verticals today where some of those things are more compelling and you see a path forward. I think there are other verticals where it's more challenging. I'll give you a really good example, sports. I think sports, like when I first got into this business, I'm going VR, sports, slam dunk, and it should be. But it's also one of the most difficult mediums to get right in VR. It's fast action, the pace is far from the camera, like it's such a well-produced medium in TV that to solve that and solve that adoption problem for sports in VR, it's gonna be a higher barrier today than, let's say, doing the car showroom thing in VR. So I think that you're already starting to see some of those things. Now, that doesn't mean we're not going to have some, what's not predictable is the technology in the standards that we're going to have 5 years now from versus today that may make sports a lot easier than what it is today. Next question. Somebody from this side of the room, you there.
So what's the boundary today? How many screens do you predict in 2016 from Gear to Cardboard to Oculus? How many people have access to consuming VR?
Okay, so I think his question is more, and I'm not sure we're the best people to answer that, but I'll let these guys go for it. So the question was, how many screens we're talking about, and let me put a little bit of a different spin on that, because you can go read any different analyst report, and there are all the numbers out there that say X billion units by 2020 and kind of so on and so forth. But I think if we focus, let's just be a little bit domestic focused for a second versus international. Realistically, when you guys are thinking about your businesses, and you guys are also, some of you are doing non-VR stuff, so you're having to figure out how much to invest in VR versus non-VR space. How many screens do you think, how many people do you think are going to be using this, let's say 4 or 5 years from now? Do you think we're going to have crossed this chasm? Because let's face it, we're all early adopters today. I think we're starting to get some of the things where we're getting the next group of folks. It remains to be seen whether those are samplers or adopters. But what are you guys projecting in terms of the numbers?
So I'm going to just take a stab at this. I have no idea, but the way I think about this is that there are 330 million people here in the U.S., and if we just look at that market, I want everyone to have, I want to give people the reason to buy the headset, right? So I want every family to have multiple headsets, like they have multiple iPads. We have 5 and we have a 4-person family. So that's I want people to leave their headset in the car, because the kids, we're going on a long car ride, and you don't dare leave that thing. So I want at least 330 million kind of headsets in the United States in the next few years. But
so
that's
does
just
Samsung,
me.
just for the.
Yeah.
Anybody else with a take on that? Next question. I think we have time maybe for 2 more questions. Yes.
It might seem like a silly afterthought, but I found that just as a practical standpoint, safety seems to be kind of an afterthought with the mobile VR. And just a couple anecdotal evidence. Like last week, I had a guy in my office trying it out, and he knocked over the monopod with a camera and it slammed on the ground, kind of thing. And even when you're in a swivel chair, sometimes you smack your knee against the desk. It seems silly now, but I mean, these are practical things. People are standing around and are moving. They're so immersed, they forget they're in a real space and they bump into things. Yeah. And what kind of things is the mobile VR industry doing to address just simple safety issues like that?
Yeah. So for good projection of voice, by the way, so I assume most of you heard that. But if you didn't hear it, it's it seems like safety's super important. Sometimes we're focused on all the candy, but we're not really focused on kind of some of these real world issues here. I'd add on to your point that there's different types of safety issues. You were bringing up literally physical safety issues where you're in mobile, and if you can move around and you're doing position tracking, how do you make sure you don't hurt yourself, something around you? There's also the motion sickness issue, which we've all talked about in the past. So what are your perspectives on where the industry is with that, and who needs to help lead on those type of things?
Well, back in 2011-12, we were working with the Microsoft Xbox Kinect team to, in front of similar challenges. And what we figured out that some standardization on the hardware side, it was super critical for it. Also understanding where you are in space and how space may affect you, and how that translates to any type of warnings, etc., within every, piece of content, whether it was a video viewer or, a full-fledged game, was critical. All those standards are now being built. We're working with some of the major hardware makers to make sure, this fits inside a kind of a more standard way of you experiencing VR.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, and I'll just say there's the all the warnings and all that type of stuff where you put on the devices. But I think what you're going to see is we're still in the early phases of this industry. And what I think you're going to see, continue to see a lot more standards coming out, a lot more research. Just, it's kind of like the early days of the auto industry, like, right, seatbelts. You didn't have seatbelts 25 years ago. And so I think you're going to see a natural progression as we learn more about whether it's where to physically be, whether it's age appropriateness, all those different types of things. And I think until we get there, we're trying to be extra cautious from my perspective, at least in terms of the warnings and things like that when you put on our devices.
I want to be sci-fi for just a second. Think 10 years ahead. And I've seen the technology already work, so it's just a matter of deciding to integrate it. In the phone, 3D scanning device, you know where you are, you know what's happening in the room. If we decide to let you know, we'll let you know. That's out there. That type of technology is there, and it's a matter of integrating everything together the same way Michael and others are integrating additional features that add so many abilities to the product.
We probably have time for one more question, and then maybe our panelists can meet with folks outside the room. How about you in the middle there?
My question is primarily for Guy. For those of us who are in production companies right now, filming scripted, fictional, 360 content, our pitch packages are all over the place, and getting funding when you're not coming from money or already on a way in is a little random, and most larger companies are like, we don't really know what to do with this.
Mm-hmm.
What is your advice for those of us who are doing
Great
this,
question.
that are in, we have teasers and shorts trying to get full funding?
So let me try and see if I understand the question. Hey, I'm a content creator, I'm a producer, I'm trying to get funding for my project, and basically, how do I really pitch the funders, the influencers out there who could support my project? We're all over the place. There aren't really standards here. Some people know more about VR, some people know less. Some people are financial focused, creative focused. How do you create the best pitch package that you can use across multiple sources, I'm assuming, without having to customize and kill yourself for
Right.
every single pitch?
Yeah, so I'm going to take a very simple kind of answer, and I'll say success begets success. Right, so we started off with a project called There, which Rob Stromberg created and showed it to Steven Spielberg, who showed it to his wife, and then he came on our advisory board, and so I think creating something small that you can kind of use as a proof of concept, I would say, is the best approach, and that doesn't even have to be your money necessarily. So I think that there are, commercial production is a way. There are a lot of tastemaker kind of lifestyle brands that are very interested in VR right now, and insofar you have those relationships, I would avail yourselves of those.
So that's like doing creative for like more of a business purpose,
for business.
To have it funded, and then you can take that to the more creative side and say, this at least shows my skill set.
Absolutely, and we have a similar kind of issue with our fundraising, right? So we've been out here for 18 months telling this, story about we're the creator of premium content, and it wasn't until we actually released The Martian that, the money started coming in, or I should say Fox released The Martian. We didn't release it, but we produced it for Fox, and so that's when the money started, kind of really coming in for us, and we're now about to close our investment round. But, similarly, I would say, if you know of other kind of production companies even that you can kind of partner with to produce something. The important thing is just to have something on your reel. That's what's really going to sell people.
Yeah. So with that, I'd like to thank our panel. I'd like to thank Guy, Halsey, Michael, and Guy. So thank you guys very much. Really appreciate it. And we'll be available for questions later. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you.